Thanks, Chair. And apologies to the Minister, I have to leave. If I leave before he comes back in, it's no disrespect. I will listen to your comments. We just have a double booking. I would appreciate the efforts of the Minister, and I do recognise that improvements are being made. But the essence of this discussion is, do we really have to go in a piecemeal manner? Can we make some really radical improvements that would alter the situation dramatically? And that is the nub of the essence, because while you've talked about addressing welfare issues and dealing with reductions in cruelty, and undoubtedly some measures are being put in place in that regard, but some of the activities that we're talking about here, it's the nature of the activity itself which is inherently cruel. And in that sense, any regulation is only minimising the damage. The root cause of the problem is the actual activity itself, and I'll make some points about that in terms of, digging for foxes, in terms of hare coursing, fur farming and so on. So I think that has to be, if you like, recognised up front. There's 11 amendments in this section. 4 of them deal with the issue of, one of them you've basically accepted in terms of the tracing of dogs and stuff, and we welcome that, and we would accept that there will probably some form of amendment to take that, so we can kind of leave that one out. We'll accept your bona fides on it, and hopefully we'll get something at report stage. So we're left with 10. Out of the 10 remaining, 4 of them deal with fur farming. And as Deputy O'Sullivan has said, I mean, I don't agree. In your opening comments, you said that, well, this activity is lawful in a number of jurisdictions, therefore we're going to keep it lawful here. What you didn't say is it's banned in probably more countries than it's actually legal. And in that sense, that's the practice that we should be following, rather than the ones that actually permit the activity. This very small industry in an Irish context, and 5 registered farms, mink farms, probably, I think one of them is possibly in jeopardy. And while we accept the point you're making, that you are going to regulate it more so, that you are going to double the inspection rates, I wonder, would you, in that context, if you're not going to ban it and accept our amendment on that, that you might address Amendment 73, whereby we do look at the issue of inspection, but we look for an independent inspectorate to look at that regard. So would that fit in with your idea of increasing the inspection? Could we get an independent animal welfare one in that regard? I think as well that the issues of the humane eradication of them when they're there is something that could be addressed, and I'm wondering, is there a contradiction between our amendment 57 and what you've said in your opening statement? Because all we've sought in that is a more humane method of killing them. If you're not going to ban the activity, could you at least agree that they wouldn't be gassed and that it would be humanely disposed of? And I do think if we are talking about enhanced codes of practice and better regulation, that you could, in this bill, regulate the manner in which they're exterminated, but there could also be a facility for enhancing the bill to deal with the conditions that they live in. It is an animal welfare regulation, and if an animal is supposed to be living in horrendous conditions, ultimately to die for its fur, we could at least give them, as they have in Germany, upgraded housing requirements of where they are, greater heights in cages, improvements in the nest boxes, ban on wire mesh floors and so on, other, enrichment toys, that kind of thing, so there'd be at least some semblance of decency while they are being, interned and then ultimately destroyed, that we could make it as painless as possible. But I don't think there's a contradiction between 57 and 73 and the Minister providing for that if he isn't going to accept our points in relation to a ban. But I would have to stress that we do believe, and I think a huge component of Irish society believes as well, that the activity in its entirety should be banned, and we don't really accept that it shouldn't be, to be honest. It's not a huge employer, it's not a worthy activity in this day and age, and I think we would be asking you to reconsider the ban aspect, but you seem pretty adamant, so in that sense we won't waste people's time on that. I would appeal to you on the 57 and 73 that it could incorporate some of your desires on this to regulate it better, while at the same time move in some way to appease ourselves. So we're kind of down to 6 amendments then after that in this patch. The 2 major ones and the foundation ones really are 25 and 26, which deal with basically activities which in and of themselves are inherently cruel. And in that sense, to talk about, dealing with welfare while allowing these activities to remain is a contradiction in fact and in reality. And we do think it's preferable to, certainly on the issue of hair coursing, remove the exclusion of hair coursing from protection of the bill. And, you know, the very fact that it's put down as an exclusion means that the activity is recognised as cruel, but the hares aren't getting the benefit of the protection of this legislation. And, you know, I don't agree with the points. We actually fundamentally disagree with the points made by the Minister that this is something that he's not going to get rid of because it provides loads of people with a livelihood and because it's a tradition. Quite simply, I'm surprised. I thought the Minister was a bit more enlightened than that, because both of those counts just really don't stand up. On the one hand, the livelihoods in relation to this, on the one hand, there's definitive evidence to show that the number of coursing clubs are in rapid decline, and the number of people following that appalling activity is thankfully being reduced. It's confined to a minority of counties, and actually the number of participants are being lessened on a regular basis. But even if it was, and obviously there are some people who make a living out of that, other jurisdictions have definitively proven that those jobs can be maintained in a drag coursing environment. It doesn't make the activity any less appealing, it removes the whole cruel aspect to it. So if you want to continue racing dogs in that way, have drag coursing. It's far better. In actual fact, if you had it, you would probably see a rebirth and a growing back of the numbers of people pursuing the activity, because those who are appalled by the bloodlust attached to it and who would stay away might then begin to follow the activity of the dogs doing it. It wouldn't be something I'd be into, but it could be. And the idea that it's a tradition, I mean, that is just too bad. I mean, I'll make a point in a minute when we get to circuses, but I mean, it was a tradition to throw people to the lions in the Colosseum on a Friday night in downtown Rome. It didn't mean it was a worthy activity. You know, traditionally there were freak shows where people with abnormalities were put on display for public ridicule and as some form of entertainment. In a modern society, to get an entertainment value out of the pain and degradation of animals actually isn't a worthy tradition, and it's something which an enlightened society would move away from. So to protect cruelty and barbarity in the name of tradition just doesn't simply add up in that regard. And I think all of the statistics from the National Parks and Wildlife of the cruelty that's caused to hares in the run-up to coursing, on the activity of coursing, how they're terrorised, released back out to be captured again, traumatised. It's just completely unacceptable, and it is something that we will be pressing later on, and I think that a lot of people in our society find reprehensible. And I do think, for similar reasons, some of the other activities highlighted, most particularly the one that didn't really get attention here, but the digging out of foxes, which you made some reference to the last time, that you had been engaged with some organisations in terms of regulating this a bit more. But I don't think allowing, you know, dogs to go underground and hunt and ferry out foxes is in any way acceptable. And I do think that those points need to be strengthened and taken on board. So they're quite critical. Like, so they're kind of two big founding principles, which we know you don't agree with. But we thought it was important to put this on the record so you know where we're coming from. It's not going to go away, and if we don't address it actually in this Animal Health and Welfare Bill, I'm pretty sure we'll be discussing it in the next one in a year or two. So why would you wait? And, you know, we might as well address it now, because enlightened society actually is more moving in a view that we're putting forward here. But just in terms of some of the other couple of specifics, there's a couple of them left in terms of then monitoring of independent animal welfare officer in relation to greyhounds and coursing. That amendment is in 67. It's a general monitoring issue. I don't know if you have a problem with that. I don't see why you would. I think it may possibly be included. Again, number 13 is about the care of animals before and after activities, whether you would have a particular objection to that. We think it could possibly be incorporated, even though, to be honest, I don't agree with animals being used in any form of entertainment, but if you are doing it, at least travelling to and fro, they get some protection as well. The only other two remaining out of those 11 then are in relation to the use of animals in circuses and birds. And I think these are two very, very important areas. And in terms of circuses, I mean, it does relate to my earlier point about entertainment. And use of animals in this way, we have in Fingal County Council, where I was a council, we were the first council to move to prohibit the activity. An awful lot of people will not go to a circus if it's one with a performing animal in it. I've no problem with circuses. Actually, don't really like clowns, to be honest, but trapeze artists and all that are grand, but a circus that has performing artists is one thing, but exploiting animals is a certainly different thing. So it's not an attack on circuses per se, it's about circuses which use animals, and particularly wild animals, because it is not natural for an elephant to put his foot on a ball or to stand on a stool and dance to a little whip or raise his leg on demand. To get him to do that requires barbaric cruelty. To have them transported as they are in totally inhumane conditions, in unnatural terrain, in the name of entertainment, to me is absolutely appalling. That we have circuses in Ireland with penguins, performing penguins, it's abhorrent. Particularly now, whatever about years ago, when there may have been an argument that a child never saw an elephant or a tiger or something, and there was some merit to it. In this day and age of enhanced travel, people with access to the internet and better education, people can see animals in their natural environment, not doing things that they were never designed to do already. And in many countries, use of animals, particularly wild animals, in performing circuses is outlawed, and legislation is going on in many other counties. And we have a growing number of local authorities actually that are taking up this call. And when we moved it in Fingal County Council a number of years ago, we were absolutely inundated with people saying this is great that this measure has been taken, because I'd actually like to take my children to a circus, but I'm not going to go if an animal is being exploited. And some of the circus providers have actually stopped using animals because of that. And I think it needs to be recognised. And I really have to say now, in this day and age, when funds are tight, and we've all been lobbied by the arts communities and particularly community arts projects to protect the Arts Council budget from further cut. The idea that the Arts Council funds circuses with performing animals is appalling, and we are looking for that to get taken out of the equation as well. So I think that's important on that. And then in terms of the last one is in relation to bird hunting, the hunting of bird species, and limiting that, because Birdwatch Ireland have pinpointed a huge number of concerns that we need to have a protocol for reporting on the species that are hunted, on the numbers that are hunted, bag returns as they call them, so that we can know and monitor the level of hunting pressures that are on at a national level. That isn't adequate at the moment. The need to ensure that any changes in hunting pressure change can be monitored, and that there's a system within the department to do this. What's the mechanism of monitoring it, of the number and impact of licences and so on. And also we need to review the listed bird species huntable in the open season. But because protecting our wildlife, if we're honest about it, the huge tourist potential, if we're talking about jobs, of protecting our natural environment is one to be adhered to as well. And I would agree with Deputy Colreevy that if we're talking about serious regulation, then we have to look at the public sector recruitment embargo and lifting it, because otherwise a lot of the measures will be unsustainable. So thanks.
Thank you. And before we go back to the Minister, Deputy Matty McGrath.